United States of America, commonly known as United States of America, is a country primarily located in North America. It consists of 50 states, a federal district, 5 major unincorporated territories, 326 Indian reservations, and some minor possessions. At 3.8 million square miles, it is world's third or fourth largest country by total area. The United States shares significant land borders with Canada to the north and Mexico to the south, as well as limited maritime border with the Bahamas, Cuba, and Russia. With a population of more than 331 million people, it is third most populous country in the world. The national capital is Washington DC and the most populous city is New York. Paleo-Indian migrants from Siberia to North America mainland at least 12,000 years ago, and European colonization began in 16th century. The United States emerged from the 13 British colonies, established the East Coast, dispute over taxation and political representation with Great Britain led to the American Revolutionary War, which established independence. In the late 18th century, the US began expanding across the North America, gradually obtaining new territories, sometimes through war, and frequently displacing Native Americans and admitting new states. By 1848, the United States spanned the continent. Slavery was legal in southern United States until the second half of the 19th century, when the American Civil War led to its obligation. The Spanish-American War and World War I established the U.S. as a world power, a status conferred by the outcome of World War II. During the Cold War, the United States fought the Korean War and Vietnam War but avoided direct military conflict with the Soviet Union. The two superpowers competed in the space race, culminating in the 1969 spacelift that first landed human on the moon. The Soviet Union dissolution in 1991 ended the Cold War, leaving the Soviet United States as the sole superpower. The United States is a federal republic and representative democracy and three separate branches of government, including a bicameral legislature. It is a founding member of United Nations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Organization of American States, NATO, and other international organizations. It is a permanent member of United Nations Security Council, considering a melting pot of culture and ethnicity. Its population has been conformably shaped by centuries of immigration. The U.S. ranks high in international measures of economic freedom, quality of life, education, and human rights, and has a low level of perceived corruption. However, the country has received criticism concerning inequality related to race, wealth, income, and the capital punishment, high immigration rate, and the lack of universal health care. The United States is a highly developed country, accounts of approximately a quarter of global GDP, as is the whole largest economy as the world's largest economy by GDP at market exchange rate. By value, the United States is world's largest importer and second largest exporter of goods. Although its population is only 4.2% of the world's total, it holds 29.4% of the total wealth in the world. The largest share held by an country, making up more than a third of global military spending. It is foremost military power in the world and is leading political culture and significant force internationally. European settlements. Claims of very old colonization of coastal New England by the Norse are disputed and controversial. The first documented arrival of Europeans in the continental United States is that Spanish conquistador such as John Ponce de Leon, who made his first expedition to Florida in 1513. European settlers also began tracking of American slaves into colonial America via the transatlantic slave trade. Because of a lower prevalence of tropical disease and better treatment, slaves had a much higher life expectancy in North America than in South America, leading to a rapid increase in their number. Colonial society was largely divided over the religious and moral implications of slavery, and the several colonies passed acts both against and in favor of practice. However, by the turn of the 18th century, African slaves had supplanted European indentured servant and cash crops labor, especially in the American South. The 13 colonies, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Peninsula, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North California, South California, and Georgia that would become the United States of America were administered by the British as overseas dependencies. All Northwest had local government with election open to most freemen. with extremely high birth rate, low death rate, and steady development settlement. The colonial population grew rapidly and escaping Native American population. The Christians revivalist movement of 1730s and 1740, known as the Great Awakening, and lifted interest both in religion and in religious liberty. During the Seven-Year War, known in the US as the French and Indian War, British forces captured Canada from the French with the creation of province of Quebec, Canada. Francophone population would remain isolated from England-speaking colonial dependencies of Nova and Newfoundland and 13 colonies. The American Revolutionary War, fought by 13 colonies against the British Empire, was first successful war of independence by non-European entry against by a non-European entity against a European power in modern history. American had developed an ideology of republicanism, a string that government rested on the will of people are expressed in their local legislature. They demanded their right as Englishmen and no taxation without representation. The British insisted on administering the empire through parliament, and the conflict escalated into war. The second the Second Continental Congress unanimously adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776. The day is celebrated annually as Independence Day. In 1777, the Article of Confederation established as decentralized government that operated until 1789. After its defeat at the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, Britain signed a peace treaty. American sovereignty became internationally recognized, and the country was granted all land east of Mississippi River. Tension with Britain remained, however, leading to the War of 1812, which was fought to a draw. Nationalists held the Phil- Philadelphia Convention of 1787 in writing the United States Constitution, ratified the State Convention in 1788. The federal government was recognized into three branches in 1789 on the principle of creating salutary check and balances. George Washington, who had led the Conventional Army to victory, was the first president elected. The number of new constitution, the Bill of Rights, forbidding federal restrictions of personal freedom, and and granting a range of legal protections, was adopted in 1791. Although the federal government outlawed American participation in the Atlantic slave trade in 1807, after 1820, cultivation of the highly profitable cotton crop exploded in the deep South, and although with its the slave population, the second greatest awakening, especially in the period 1800-1840, converted millions of evangelical evangelical Protestantism in the north in in an energized multiple social reform movement, including abolitionism in the south. Methodist and the Baptist proselytized among slave population. Being in the late 18th century, American settlers began to expand westward, promoting a long series of American Indian War. In 1803, Louisiana purchased almost double of the nation area. Spain created Florida and other Gulf Coast territories in 1819, and the Republic of Taxation was annexed in 1845 during a period of expansionism, and the 1846 Oregon Treaty. The Britain let the US control the present-day American Northwest. Victory in the Mexican-American War resulted in 1848 Mexico cession of California and much as of the present-day American Southwest, making the US span of continent. The California Gold Rush of 1848-1849 served migration to the Pacific coast, which led to the California genocide and the creation of additional West states and the giving away of vast quantities of land to white European settlers as the part of Homestead Act. Nearly 10% of the total area of United States and to private as railroad companies and colleges of parts of land grants separate colonized development. After the Civil War, the new transcontinental railway made regulation easier for settlers, expanded internal trade, and increased conflict with Native Americans. In 1869, a new peace policy nominally promoted to promote Native Americans they after abuse and avoid future way and ensure the eventual US citizenship. Nevertheless, large-scale conflicts continued throughout the West into the 1900 Civil War and Reconstruction era. The irreconcilable sectional conflict regarding the enslavement of Africans and African Americans ultimately led to the American Civil War. With the 1600 elections of 1860 election of a Republican Abraham Lincoln Convention in the 13 slave states declared secession and formed the Confederate States of America and the South, or the Confederacy, while the federal government, the Union, maintained the segregation was illegal. In order to bring about the secession, military act was initiated by the secessionists, and the Union responded in kind. The ensuing war would become the deadliest military conflict in American history, resulting in the death of approximately 618,000 soldiers as well as many civilians. The Union initially simply fought to keep the country united. Nevertheless, as casualties mounted after 1863 and Lincoln delivered its Emancipation Proclamation, the main purpose of the war for Union viewpoint become the abolition of slavery. Indeed, when the Union ultimately won the war in April 1865, each of the states was in the defeated South was required to rectify the 13 amendments which prohibited slavery except a penal labor. As penal labor, two other amendments were also ratified, ensuring citizens for blacks and, at least in theory, voting rights for all as them. Two other amendments were also ratified, ensuring citizenship for blacks and, at least in theory, voting rights for them as well. Reconstruction began in earliest following the war, while President Lincoln attempted for foster friendship and forgiveness between Union and former Confederacy. His assassination on April 14, 1865 drove a wedging north and south again. Between North and South again. Republicans in the federal government made it their goal to oversee all rebuilding of the South and ensuring the rights of African Americans. They resist until the Compromise of 1877, when the Republicans agreed to cease protesting the rights of African American in the South in order for Democrats to concede the presidential election of 1876. South and white Democrats calling themselves Redeemers took control of the South after the end of Reconstruction, being the nadir of American race relation from 1819 to 1910. The Redeemers established so-called Jim Crow law, disenfranchising most blacks and some poor whites throughout the region. Black would face racial segregation nationwide, especially in the South. They also occasionally experienced violent violence, including lynching. Further immigration expansion and industrialization in the North